Hey there, I'm Andrew from Club Ready DJ School, and in this video I'm going to talk about ways to make our mixing more exciting. But first of all, there are a ton of ways we can mix between tracks. For instance, like mixing in after the chorus, or replacing the drop, or doing double drops, or mixing for energy by either taking the energy up or bringing it back down, to even drawing out transitions using advanced EQ work, to even mixing quickly, right, to avoid vocals on vocals. Now, all of which I smash out in detail in my courses, but once you have that down, and let's say you're starting to feel a little bit more adventurous, this video is more about finding ways to make your mixing more exciting, not only for you, but also for your audience. So let's face it, right? One of the most common questions people ask me is, what do you do in the time between transitions? Meaning, let's say I've put a track on, right, and everyone loves it, so you decide to let it play for a few minutes. Then what do you do in that 3 minutes between transitions? Now, in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 cool ways to make your mixes more exciting and ways to keep your audience captivated for your entire set. Now, first and foremost, I know people like to do effects in the down parts of each track, and sure, okay, I'm going to talk about this, and it's definitely a good skill to have, incorporating effects into your mixes. But personally, from having almost 2 decades of experience DJing and running club events, people on the dance floor are going to respond so much better to hearing a little bit of familiarity, maybe some familiar patterns or vocal overlays, and they're going to like that probably a little bit more than effects the whole time. So, for instance, right, I just talking to my own experience here, but I had this student in Sydney recently who loved techno, and he was asked by a close friend to play at her party. However, she loved tech house, which by its very nature is considered, I guess, a bit more commercial than techno, right? And when mixing tech house, sure, we can draw out our transitions a lot longer than actual commercial music. But in general, the tech house, it's like kind of like based on the kind of like structure of like verses and choruses, and it's definitely got defined parts. As sometimes techno, and even trance for that matter, mixing feels a little bit more like a journey. So this guy asked me, what should he do? And I said, if you're not willing to compromise your style, and that means bust out all the latest tech house tracks for the sake of your friend, perhaps a compromise may be to find some acapellas of the big, tech house or even house tracks, and overlay the vocals on of those tracks onto the techno tracks where there may not be a lot going on. And this in turn not only creates familiarity, but it also stays true to your own personal sound. So let me give you a couple of examples of that. So I love putting vocals on stuff, and I'm all about that, and I do think it's a good compromise. So say for instance here, let's say I've got a, just like a techno song going. Oh, it's actually minimal deep tech, right? So, I'm putting that all sort of in the same kind of, I know it's different, right? But I mean, stuff that's drawn out, and they're similar in a lot of ways. So let's say I hit play here. Okay, cool. And we can hear there, let's just say it's really cool. It's got a good vibe, but let's say there's not a lot going on, and let's say that's the kind of tone you want to set, make it sound like that. But let's say there's not a lot going on. Maybe I could find an a cappella. Now, in my performance class course, I actually talk about, how to find a cappellas and how to set them up and everything, because you've got to, sometimes there's a bit to it, you've got to line up the grids all properly, and there's a bit of a process there. But I've already gone and done that. I've set my cue and stuff, it's all ready. And I'm just going to actually put a vocal part just sort of on the, I guess the main part of the song essentially. So let's go for that. Okay, see that coming up. Oh, okay. See, I know sync would have done that immediately, and I guess that's the advantage of using sync, okay, but still. Okay, you see, at the moment, I'm not actually doing a lot here, but it has added a little bit of color to that, okay? Okay, and I just let that go, and see, you're staying true. So people on the dance floor could be like, oh wow, this is a cool vibe, you've got the vibe. But then you're compromising by putting a little bit of a vocal on there as well. So I'll keep it going for a little bit longer. You can get addicted to a certain kind of sadness, like resignation to the end. Okay, and we get the idea there. So like that there, that's actually not too bad. It's actually a lot of fun. So I'll do another example of that too. Let's load this up. So okay, this is a bit more of a progressive vibe, and I love using this a cappella. I use it a lot actually. So for the people who listen to my channel, you know, I've gone and set it all up, but I have used this like a few times and I love it. So okay, so let's say then I've got a down part of the song. And that's the thing, that's when it came, that techno guy, like he came and then in those down parts, he just started busting out effects. And I was like, you know what, let's try an a cappella on that. And he was like, oh my God, it's really cool. So, okay, I'll show you this one again. Oh, this one. Okay.
Show me easy, show me the heartache. I'll be what you want, and it's physical. Keep it subliminal. Show me what you want. Show me easy, show me the heartache. I'll be what you want, and it's physical. Keep it subliminal. Show me what you want.
Okay. Yeah, okay, so that's actually, yeah, it's like I said, that's not actually that hard. It's just actually placing them in the right place and having them lots up your sleeve. Now just quickly, I do dive way deeper into all of this in my Performance Plus course, and I have videos on finding and preparing a cappellas, or even how to take vocals off tracks and incorporate them and familiar patterns into your mixing. As at the end of the day, if you're playing and not getting much response on the dance floor, adding something familiar can honestly, I've seen it so many times, it can bring the crowd to life and it can re-energize them. I've honestly seen it a million times. So moving forward, as well as using a cappellas, you could just experiment with putting melodies on parts of the track as well. So you just find something where there's not as much going on. So for instance, in this recent melodic house video I did, I wanted to start on a particular track, okay, as I felt it created a really cool opening tone, right, for the set that I was about to create. But what happened was there was like at least a few minutes there where there was like nothing happening, and I was standing there feeling like, oh, what you guys are feeling, and they, oh, I want to do something, and I thought, and I tried doing some effects, and I'll show you that in a second, and I can definitely do both, you know. But sometimes just putting a bit of familiarity can be a lot of fun. So there were some tracks in my playlist that weren't included that were pretty cool. So what I did was I just went and found the bit where there was like a melody, probably in the breakdown a lot of times for techno and the progressive stuff. There might be some cool melody, and then just gave myself some time to mix it in. So this one here, I'll just drag it up, and I'm on the 400 today because I did last week's one on the DDJ 400, so I'm just doing a little series on here. But realistically, like they all operate the same way. I guess the advantage of this is you have got a little bit more visuals. Personally, I like it without the visuals, but I'm keeping the visuals on for you today, so you know, it's not that big a deal. So okay, so we go here, and then so I've got my opening track here, but then see here in this second track, I've gone and found the melody that I liked, and I've just put a cue point, I think like 16 bars earlier or something. So okay, I'll go set my cue here, and let's say I'm mixing. Okay, let's just do it. I'll give you an example. Okay, I've got to put my headphones on. I haven't got my speaker hooked up, so just so I can hear it. Okay. And you see what I mean? It's already sort of playing, and I was like, you know what? There's about 3 minutes to my next mix point. What am I going to do? And I think this personally comes down to like EQ work really, because this one's got a lot going on, this one doesn't. So I've got to keep this one underneath, there's no doubt. But then I have to be careful, like, you know, like this one's going to kick back in. So I'm just sort of using the melody, but I've got to be careful of it not kicking back in. Okay, and then I'm at my mix point anyway, and then I could start mixing the new track there. But it just kind of, I don't know, I personally like doing that more than I do like incorporating effects. I like just keeping stuff interesting, using the down parts to kind of maybe bring in a little bit of familiarity when I can. But anyway, that's a lot of fun. Let's do one more example of that. And I've got another couple of examples. Like, it's not just all the same stuff. I'm going to go into some effects, but then I'm going to talk about sometimes how using a third deck could actually really help when mixing like this. So let's just do one more though. But then, with that example, I'll just stop it there. But I've got to be careful, like, if they're getting too much going on. So I'm talking about down bits, but that bit was definitely the down bit. So I just put a little bit of a familiar pattern in there, just for familiar pattern in there, just for a little bit. But then once it started building up, I had to make a decision, and I just kind of like took out the familiar pattern and just let that song continue. But again, a little bit like that there, a little bit of excitement like that could have actually gone really well, like when playing live. Now, I could have even gone way more commercial than that. And if you want to see my Tech House 3-deck mix, I was using familiar patterns and acapellas throughout, so I'll link in that video now. But in this case, let's say you're playing techno and you want to be careful not to cross a line. And what I mean by this is you don't want to go too commercial. Then even though, like, you know, what I just did then, Meet Her at the Love Parade, right, is a really well-known track. It's well known in the house scene. So in essence, you're bringing in a little familiarity, but at the same time, you're staying true to your sound and you're not busting out the latest pop. So again, I guess it depends on what genre you're playing, but familiarity doesn't have to mean commercial. It can mean sort of, well, I guess it kind of is commercial, but not like commercial. You don't have to go to the level of like Marshmello. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying you can bring in old house classics, stuff people haven't heard for a while, and you don't have to commit to playing that song. You just bring in the pattern that everyone likes, keep that in there, and it kind of can bring your set to life. But back to that 3-deck house mix I did. I actually, in that, just an example on this, I used a Madonna vocal, okay? And later in that mix, a Prince vocal, and the majority were pretty cool with that, right? But I did receive some comments with people saying like, what are you doing, man? So just be mindful of your audience. And if you bring in something familiar, 100%, it's gonna liven up the way you mix, and it's gonna make like your mixing way more exciting for you and your audience. But still, you do have to try and read the crowd and stay true to your sound. So in that case where I brought in that Piece of Your Heart song, if that went really well, maybe I could keep that as a tease, and then maybe I even go into that track later on. And that's what you could do too. You could tease these patterns, and if people respond really well and then they're upset they didn't go to that song, then you could actually come into it later. So it's like you're using these familiar patterns to tease in potential tracks, gauging people's responses and feeling stuff out in the down points. It's actually, I love it. That's how I play like that a lot. And personally, if it was me, I would actually have a ton of familiar patterns ready in a folder, and even acapellas, right, ready to go, which you can draw from anytime your set needs to come to life. And in my Performance Plus course, I know I'm pushing this a little bit, but it really relates to this. In that course, I go into finding familiar patterns, acapellas, organizing them, setting cue points, then how to incorporate it. So you have dozens of professional combinations that you can pull from at any time, assuring huge dance floors, taking your sets from okay to outstanding. And this means you're going to get repeat shows whenever you play, because it's all about creating that atmosphere. Anyway, there's one more thing to note, okay? When you are using familiar patterns, okay, sometimes you can actually miss your mix out point. So I'll give you an example. Let's imagine, I'm about to show you one in a second, but let's imagine I've got a chorus playing just then, okay? And I've got something on top of the chorus, and all of a sudden, right, the chorus is about to end, and that's where I was planning to mix in my new song. But let's say I've got a familiar pattern on it, then all of a sudden I might miss my opportunity to mix into where I wanted to mix. And that means all of a sudden it hasn't quite worked for you. So honestly, that's when 3-deck mixing can really come into play, okay? And that is, you're using familiar patterns, like, oh no, I wanted to mix my third song in there, okay? So again, in the Performance Class section, I've got a whole section on 3-deck mixing, and it's kind of like this step through. I start with creative mixing, we go into familiar patterns, acapellas, even looping effects, everything, right? And it ends with then actually introducing more than 2 players. And even if you haven't only got 2 players for now, it opens the door for a way of thinking, okay? So I'll give you an example of that. Let's say, first of all, I've got, and this is when I first was sort of messing around with 3-decks actually. I was playing this track and I was putting a cool vocal in the breakdown. But then now leading up to go to the drop, and I'd already played 1 or 2 drops of the song, and I put a vocal in the breakdown. I didn't really want to play that third drop. I wanted to keep the energy moving and ideally replace that drop with a new song. But then by mixing the familiar pattern into the breakdown, I missed my mix out point. I'm like, oh, that's when a 3rd deck could come into play. And this is all a lead up in a way to next week's class, because that I'm going to do with you guys. And that is actually how I would be using 3 decks as well. Now, I know I've done a video on that, but I'm going to do it with the DDJ 1000, showing you how to use dual players and how you translate that to club equipment. That's what this series is all about now. But let me give you an example of this. So let's say this song's playing, okay? And you see, here's my mixed out point here. If I want to replace the drop, I need my 3rd deck to come in here. And then I'll be like, bang, 3rd deck, and then I'd be building. But I've missed it because I'm doing this vocal bit. Okay, and don't get me wrong, it's still pretty cool like that, but could have been better for the third deck. So let me do one more of those. I'll show you an example, and that means see what happens with familiar patterns. You can just get carried away a little bit. So I'll give you an example of just getting carried away. So let's say I've got this song playing, okay, and let's say I'm going to bring a vocal in on this bit here, but then I really need to be mixing there, you know. But I'm playing around with the familiar pattern pretty much on top of the whole chorus. That means we're having a third deck. Could really open this up. So I'll show you. Let's have a look. Okay. Cool. And you get the idea, but then I've missed both my mix out cues because I've been messing around the whole time. And ideally, I wanted to mix out of this track, like the main track playing here on the left. I wanted to mix out of that and bring in my new song here. And that's really where 3-deck mixing comes into play, and you can keep things moving. And yeah, at first it can be really hard to kind of tracking what's going on. But it's more for the DJs that I guess have reached a plateau with their mixing. And I know that happened to me recently. I was just sort of playing a bit and I'd reached a plateau, and then bringing 3 decks in really kind of took it all to the next level. It's something I really suggest. Moving on, the third way to make your set way more exciting is by using effects. Now, I have a whole section on effects in my Performance Plus course where I go into so much more detail and talk all about what the main effects are and how and where to use them to make your transitions world class. But in this video, I'm just going to give you a couple of things to play around with, okay? So here's the thing, heaps of DJs I find in the down parts are using echo a lot, and it's kind of to create, like, I guess, these mini build-ups and creates more energy. And I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of actually like pro techno DJs do this. So that is, I'll give you an example, but then I'll show you a better way. I'll show you a way that's okay, but then I'll show you a better way that I think that I'd be using actually, and that is, well, you'll see. So here's the thing. So let's just say, first of all, we'll go back to this melodic house and techno song. So let's say I've got this, and this is what I did initially, and I was playing around with that, and I was like, you know what, let's just put a familiar pattern on it. But okay, let's go in. So let's say this is building up and I'm in this chorus section. I like using the echo probably about a 3/4. So if you can't see your effects here, let's go into effects. Let's go, yeah, put that on the first channel of each deck. Go here, echo, put that at a 3/4. Okay, so that means I've loaded 3/4 here to your beat effects. Okay, if there's more on that in last week's video. Okay, so let's say I'm in there. What people do is they're like, okay, I've got my beat effects here, channel 1. Okay, and maybe at the end of the phrase. Okay, you could even control it here. Okay, make it a bit tighter. And you go in and kind of create build-ups. And to be honest, it's okay, but it gets kind of old fast. You know what I mean? If you're doing that all the time, you know, it's not bad though. I like it. But what I would suggest is, let's say then I wasn't putting a familiar pattern on that, and my next song in the playlist was this Camel Fat Rabbit Hole song. So I'll show you an example and I'll apply the effects to the one that I plan to mix in. Okay, let's do this. So, okay. loop 2 bars. Actually, you know what? Maybe I'll get a cleaner loop. Okay, and what I could do is, okay, I could have then the underneath one. Put the effects on that one. And be like, and then I'm not messing with the top one. I've just got like a cool beat underneath. And I'm in there and I'm like, now, there are more effects we can do in the down bits. Like I know, noise is actually really cool. And I like doing a combination where it's noise and echo. But on here, I'm kind of limited. I've only kind of got filter as a color effect. So maybe I might do that in another video coming up. And also another technique that we could do is, let's say, that James Hype method he's got where it's like noise and cutting at the same time. I've got something that's actually really similar to that, but doesn't involve spending hours and hours working on your like coordination skills, with doing, that'll take a while. It's like scratching, you've got to kind of like work on those skills. So I have this thing where I can incorporate noise and trans effect, and trans literally kind of is volume cutting. It's cutting in and out of the track. So it's actually pretty cool. So let me know if that interests you, and if it does, I could actually, do a video about that 100%. Anyway, thanks heaps for all your support. You're all legends. I really appreciate you. And because I have been like promoting a little bit the Performance Plus course in this video, right? Because I guess this video relates to the Performance Plus course a lot. What I'll do is I'll put a 20% discount code in the description just for this week. So if you want to check that out, now's a good time. But I'm just really proud of it. And, I've got a lot of good feedback on it. But anyway, thanks again for tuning in. Can't wait for next Monday. Love you guys. Cheers.